Hello everyone, welcome to the session on cybernetic literature, a fascinating and emerging branch of literary studies that reflects how digital technology is transforming the very nature of writing and reading. When we talk about cybernetic literature, we refer to literary forms that are born in or shaped by the digital and networked environment. These include blogging, microblogging, flash fiction, literature, and micropoetry, among others. In traditional literature, we often discuss novels, plays, and poetry that exist within printed books. But cybernetic literature moves beyond the page. It lives on screens, in feeds, and in the interconnected world of online audiences. This form of literature matters because it helps us recognize new ways of storytelling that reflect today's fast paced, connected world. It also mirrors the social realities of our time, like information overload, fragmented attention, online activism, and the democratization of publishing. So, why is this relevant to our course, recent trends in literature? Because these forms challenge our traditional assumptions about what literature is. They make us rethink what it means to be an author, a reader, and even what it means to tell a story. They are especially important in today's world where digital platforms have become spaces of expression, resistance, and creativity. A blog post can voice a protest. A flash fiction piece can capture an entire lifetime in 500 words. A tweet can become a poem. So, through this topic, you will learn to analyze how literary art adapts to digital spaces and how these forms reflect and sometimes challenge social and cultural realities. Let's now look at the key forms of cybernetic literature and understand how each one functions. First, blogging and blog fiction. Blogging began as a personal online journal but quickly evolved into a powerful literary and political tool. Writers use blogs not only to share opinions but also to create serialized narratives where each blog post forms part of an ongoing story. This is called blog fiction. A blog novel, for example, might be written as a series of dated entries, each posted periodically. Readers can comment, react, and even influence the story. The interaction between writer and reader becomes part of the literary experience. Blogs also democratize writing. Anyone with internet access can become a storyteller. They give voice to marginalized communities, independent writers, and activists who may not have access to mainstream publishing. Next, microblogging. Platforms like Twitter, Mastodon, and Threads are examples of microblogging spaces. Here, users share very short messages, often limited to 280 characters, that can instantly reach a global audience. Writers have used these platforms to experiment with storytelling in miniature forms. For example, scholars such as L. Aksharai in Twitter Fiction, a new creative literary landscape, point out that stories told in 140 characters or less redefine literary art for the digital age. Microblogging fiction thrives on brevity, immediacy, and interaction. Then we have flash fiction and microfiction. These are complete stories, often under 1,000 words, that compress character, plot, and emotion into a single burst of narrative. Think of Ernest Hemingway's famous 6 word story, For Sale, Baby Shoes Never Worn. Just 6 words, yet it evokes an entire world of emotion, loss, and imagination. Flash fiction demands precision. Every word counts. It reflects our time, short attention spans, fast information flow, but still retains the emotional depth of traditional storytelling. Within this family is literature. Literature written or shared through tweets. Writers craft stories within the constraints of 280 characters, or they post longer narratives across multiple tweets. A detective novel published tweet by tweet is a perfect example of this evolving form, as observed by Andre Mir in his essay Literature Enjoying Literature in Bits. Finally, micropoetry. These are poems small enough to fit in a tweet, often experimental, visual, and open to interpretation. They might use hashtags, line breaks, or emojis as part of poetic expression. Platforms like Twitter and Instagram have made micropoetry popular among young writers and readers alike. In short, each of these digital forms, blogs, tweets, microstories, and micropoems, shows us how technology reshapes not just how we write, but how we think about literature itself. Then, next, let's explore how we can analyze these forms and connect them to real life social conditions as outlined in our course objective. Example number 1, Twiterature as social commentary. Writers have used Twitter not only for storytelling but also for raising awareness on issues like gender, environment, and politics. A series of tweets may narrate the story of a climate activist in 280 character for fragments. Each tweet builds tensions and reflects the fragmented experience of living in a media saturated world. This mirrors our contemporary condition where stories unfold in real time across digital networks. Example number 2, Flash fiction and oppression. Flash fiction often becomes a medium for the unheard voices, those on the margins of society. A 300-word story about a migrant worker's brief phone call home can speak more powerfully than a long novel. The consciousness compels the reader to imagine the silence between words, the gaps of poverty, distance, and struggle. As pro writing aid notes, flash fiction achieves its power through implication rather than. Example number 3, Blogging as resistance. Blogs have become a modern space for resistance literature. Think of activists, scholars, or students using blogs to discuss environmental degradation in hill stations or the digital divide in rural education. Each post is both a reflection and an act of expression, literature that directly engages with the world. So, how do we analyze such works? We must look at both form and context. Ask questions like, how does the platform, a blog, a tweet, or a story site shape the narrative voice? How does the brevity of the medium influence theme and tone? What social issues emerge through these forms, and how they are communicated differently from print literature? By doing this, we move from reading passively to engaging critically with how digital media change storytelling and social representation. Now, let's move to the creative and reflective part of our topic. Understanding cybernetic literature is not only about analyzing existing works, it is also about creating. So, here is how you can practically apply what you have learned. You could write a short blog post narrating a day in the life of a student learning remotely from a rural campus. Include links, reflections, and even readers' comments. Or you might craft a flash fiction piece under 500 words that capture an emotional or social moment, perhaps a story about migration, environmental change, or online identity. You can also try Twiterature, a story told through 5 or 6 tweets, each 280 characters long, using a common hashtag such as digital dreams or St. Joseph's lives. These small acts of creativity help you experience the challenge and beauty of brevity, immediacy, and connection. And if you are more poetic, experiment with micro poetry, a short verse that conveys emotion, insight, or irony in under 140 characters. Your poem could be something as simple as Wi Fi flickers, dream buffer, knowledge loads slowly, yet hope refreshes. That's micro poetry, minimal in form but full of resonance. Remember, each of these exercise ties directly back to the course objective. You're recognizing and using the key terms such as blogging and flash fiction. You're understanding dimensions of social and digital oppression. You're applying theoretical concepts to real world storytelling. You're evaluating how social conditions are reflected in literature. And finally, you're creating using language and imagination to offer insights and even propose solutions. For instance, a flash story about a landslide in Wayanad might end with a character initiating a community project. That is literature proposing action, an example of how cybernetic forms can be both artistic and socially meaningful. To conclude, cybernetic literature marks a turning point in how we think about writing and reading. It dissolves the boundaries between author and reader, between text and technology. In these forms, blogs, tweets, flash stories, micro poems, we see the pulse of digital generation expressing itself with speed, precision, and creativity. As students of literature, your task is not only appreciate these forms but also to question them. How do they shape public discourse? How do they give voice to the marginalized? And how can they be used to imagine a more inclusive and responsible digital society? For further reading, you can refer to the given text. So, as we explore recent trends in literature, let's remember the future of storytelling is not confined to paper. It scrolls, it clicks, it tweets, and it connects. Thank you for listening, and I hope this session inspires you to both read and write in the evolving language of our digital age. Thank you once again. Signing off, Prasanth Arokia Samy, Assistant Professor of English, PG and Research Department of English, St. Joseph's College.